Welcome back, and let's continue our understanding and explanation of how the creation of the world is viewed from a Kabbalistic point of view, as opposed to our natural humanistic approach, where the creation of the world was viewed, even if we take the Bible's approach, it's viewed as the creation of the world for a human, right? It starts with, if you read the Bible, the very first verses, right? The first chapters, it talks about the creation of the world and then the creation of the human. Over here, the Kabbalistic approach, it's interesting to know, just like we mentioned, that Kabbalistic approach is more esoteric, more mystical. I would also prefer to add that it's more metaphorical, right? Psychological understanding of how we can view the creation of the world from a Kabbalistic point of view. So as we have described in the previous sessions, we have the central point, right? Outside, we have a circle which represents the world. Outside of the circle, we have the divine, the light of the divine infinity, I like to call it, right? Divine light, or light of the infinity, but I like to call it the light of the divine infinity. Outside is the infinity. Outside is absolute. Again, the psychological, analytical psychology term. The circle represents the boundaries, where the tzimtzum, the withdrawal occurred, creates the boundaries between this world and the outside. And inside the circle, we already mentioned, we have something called avir, which is the reflection of the original divine, the light of the divine infinity, something we refer to in this world as the air, the very, very weak, the very, very faint reflection of the original light of the divine infinity, but it represents the fact that God is here with us, because the light of the divine infinity is one of the attributes we describe God. And the reflection from that is that the air represents the fact that even though God has withdrawn to make space for the world to exist, right? Because when it's absolute, there is nothingness. But we need to make space. The space was created to create the world where something will exist, right? That something has a meaning. And it's also important to start understanding that the air represents that God has withdrawn, but God also stays. God is not here, but God is here constantly with us. Air represents this godliness that we get, the support, the resources, the feeling that something, some kind of reflection, some kind of reflection, some kind of part of God is still always here with us. Now, it's interesting, another kind of philosophical discussion that I want to bring here is the idea of the round. One of the philosophical explanations of the round is that the round represents nature. And we talk about it. You're welcome to watch. I have a video where I explain all shapes, that what they represent, what they mean within the NeuroGraphic method. Those meanings are not just within the NeuroGraphic method. Those meanings are metaphorical understandings of what shapes represent to us, psychological. And one of the explanations for the circle is that it represents nature, the way nature is presented to us. And it's interesting to know that the laws of nature have no changing purpose, okay? The laws of nature, the nature always stays the same, no matter what happens in life, right? No matter if something good or something bad, the sun will always come up in the morning. It will settle at dawn, right? And then the moon will come up. The moon will be either full or not full according to its cycle, right? The nature follows through. The trees grow, the fruit grows, right? And it's interesting to note the idea, there is a philosophical explanation here, that nature represents this idea of the circle. It's not going into one specific direction, but rather it goes into all directions. It represents everything and nothing at the same time. Also, the idea that it represents nature is the idea is that represents everything, following the laws of nature, but there is no something very humanistic here. There is no will. There's no direction. it's interesting to note, there is the world before what we're going to explain now. The next step, I'm going to bring to you the ray of light. Before the ray of light, the world just represented that just existence without any reasons, without, I like to call it, without any interest, right? In the NeuroGraphic method, all of you know that whenever you come to me for any sessions, it's about what is your goal? If you have no goal, then what is the point for your existence? The concept of the ray of light, as it's also referred to as the beam, it's interesting to start understanding. First, we created the empty space, but now the emptiness has to contribute further. What is the purpose, right? That's a very, like I said before, humanistic approach. What is the purpose? What is the direction? How do you want to go? Remember, the emptiness, the circle represents going in all directions, which really means, right? Going everywhere means going nowhere, because you can't go at the same time. But again, that's our human approach, because that's how a human operates. We go into one direction. We cannot possibly go into all directions, but that's not how nature is. Nature is able to follow laws without having a reason for it, right? The sun doesn't need a reason why it needs to get to, rise on the east and set on the west, or the opposite, right? There is no reason. The nature doesn't ask for reasons. The nature just acts according to the laws. But it's interesting to note that we have something called the ray of light. The ray of light enters right here. The ray of light, in this specific case, we're going to do it like this. It enters from top and goes straight until it reaches the center. The ray just now created a direction. The ray just now created a direction that represents purpose. This is a male category of the universe, by the way. The purpose, the understanding. What is it in life that you want to do? We know this also represents what? Growth. Vertical line is the representation of the growth, right? And this is a metaphor for a human. Ray is a metaphor for a human. We, as humans, are rays in the universe. We create directions. We bring purpose. We identify purpose. We create purpose. We bring purpose into life. We fulfill purpose in life. Goal, orientation, direction. I like to call it all together as purpose. And this is the Kabbalistic view of the world, that a human being invading the world of nature and paves the way for the realization of the divine goals in it. Your soul mission, your life mission, combining both together. This is what I teach in the Goals and Values course. How do you combine your soul mission with your life mission? How do you even discover your soul mission? Discovering here on this level, on the divine level. Nature itself, like I mentioned before, does not strive for anything. But a man comes in, starts using nature, right? Using the wood to cut up and create a house. Using the knife, man-made material, to cut up the vegetables and create a salad. And this is how purpose is brought into the world. This is how we utilize the understanding of the human invention, the creation of the human, is to bring purpose. We can also use the word creativity. Something very unique that only humans can do. Creation, creativity, using natural items, nature's items, approaching it creatively, creating a purpose for it, creating a need or a use for it. That's what's represented by this ray of light or the beam. Notice, by the way, that the ray of light is straight. Now, If I look at it from the NeuroGraphica point of view, where am I going to add to it? Of course, I'm going to add to it what? The neural line. What does this represent? Remember what the neural line represents? The neural line is a combination of the natural, which is represented by the circle, with the man-made, which is represented by the straight, right? Because the man originally is very straight. What I see is what it is, right? But the neural line, which is a female, feminine energy, feminine approach to life, is taking the straight and softening it up, adding the rounding, adding the circle to it. So the neural line contains elements of the circle. Each neural line is a potential circle. And that's a combination, right? In the NeuroGraphica here, what I'm bringing to you is the combination of the neural line with a straight line. And this is how we are going to explore further in the NeuroSefirot course. We're going to use the straight line of the Sefirot, the laws, the explanation, the understanding of the Sefirot knowledge, with the circular approach, with the feminine energy, the connection to the infusion, the integration of the neural line. And that is understanding. How can we approach everything in life, nature or not nature or man-made? How do we approach and use creativity? How do we approach and use, the connection of masculine and feminine, connecting both to create something very unique, to create you, right? Those of you in the reparenting course, remember what I'm talking about, right? This is what we work with. We connect the feminine, connect the masculine, and create something very, very unique, which is who you are. Welcome again to join me for the NeuroSefirot course. More information at the NeuroGraphicaUSA.com. You can also try Lana, Shalom.com. Okay, for some countries, I don't know why this website doesn't work, so that's why you can use NeuroGraphicaUSA.com. And I'm going to finish today's session to remind you, remember now we have two derivatives of the original light of the divine infinity or Ein Sof. It's number one was the air or vir that exists in the world. And that's a feminine also aspect, right? It's there. We don't see it, but it's there. Just like motherly love, motherly care. It's always there. We don't necessarily always see it, let's say when we're adults, but we know it's always exists there. And of course, the ray of light. The ray of light also represents the taking all of this divine light, right? The light of the divine infinity that exists outside of the circle, kind of concentrating it together and creating, like on a physics as a science, physics as a science, sense of understanding, putting all the molecules together, right? To create something very, very substantial. And that's where that substantiality will break the circle and enter. What else does this remind you of? Of course, the creation of a human, right? The circle represents the female egg, and the ray represents the sperm, the zygote that breaks the semen, that breaks down the penetration, that breaks down the boundaries of the egg. And by breaking down, reaching the center, it creates a zygote. It creates an embryo, a fetus, the future child, the future baby, future human being. And this is the full understanding, also another Kabbalistic way to explain how the creation of the world. This is what I was telling you about. The creation of the world occurs now, every single time we do anything. Okay, metaphorically, we do the same thing. We must concentrate our energy to create a direct, straight ray of light, direct, straight direction, create a direction, and that's the only way we can penetrate the boundaries of the impossible. And I talk about the boundaries of the impossible, and you can welcome to see it's called the Neuro Miracle course. I did an introduction to it, where I talked about the world originally being the impossible and how we can break it down, going layer by layer. We will talk about the four worlds in 2 sessions. Next session, I will give you the explanation on actually the way I'm going to talk about the 4 worlds, and then we're going to talk about the creation of the Sefirot. Okay. Another thing I do want to bring down, that this ray of light is a very, very high temperature, which is another reason why it penetrates and breaks down the boundaries. One of the philosophical explanation also brings down the round versus the straight, is that the round is, it kind of has no morality, they say, because it's natural. It's, like I said before, it goes into all directions. But the straight line is a direction. It's a will of human. So it does break through, and it creates morality, creates purpose and understanding why life is important. And one more meaning before we leave, before I turn it off, is the freedom and necessity. The circle represents the freedom to do whatever you want, to go into all directions. Ray of light represents necessity. What is important to you, right? This is one of the ways we use NeuroGraphic in a session, the coaching session, when we decide, is this goal, is it an important goal for you? Because if it's important enough, you will concentrate yourself and you will create a ray of light. You will create a direction that will break through and bring forth important what? Important results in your life. So when you make something important for yourself, when you make it, and by importance, it always means necessary, whether it's physically necessary, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, it's up to you to figure it out. But once you make it necessary, once you make it important, you start utilizing it and bringing it into your life. And that's where it comes. Okay, so join me for the next, in the next session, I'm going to explore the creation of the 4 worlds, the 3 stages of formation of the Sefirot, and of course, the tree of life itself, the actual structure of the Sefirot.